The following paid service announcement is brought to you by the Chefs Unknown. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, roasted pumpkin seeds are a wonderful treat around the holiday season. The same is not true for apple seeds, or coconuts, or squirrels. The fuck is wrong with you people?
Will you quit trying to force this comedy on these fucking people? They're not here to hear you talk about some fucking Chefs Unknown. We have an agenda again here today. This is Movies 360, and I am your soon-to-be new host, LC.
You'd have to stay off the police banter long enough for me to do that. Either that or out of the STD clinics. I know what you do every night before we start this. I see you will see.
Hey, my past is fucking an open book, okay? Everyone knows about my track record. But the real thing is, what about the track record of the film we have today? The legendary, the iconic, the birth of the slasher film itself, Halloween.
Welcome back, dear viewers, to Movies 360. Today we will be looking at the horror icon that is John Carpenter with his groundbreaking and legendary Halloween.
Really? That is how you're gonna fucking introduce this fucking film? This is our first official episode. The Movie 360 has started, and we are here to do Halloween today. Stop this fucking forced humor shit, alright? I mean, these people don't want to hear your bad fucking jokes. They want to hear us talk about this legendary, iconic John Carpenter film.
Well, yeah, usually this isn't the kind of movie that I get really excited about talking about, as I'm usually hiding in my closet.
Well, personally, I'm pretty sure we all know how hidden in the closet you are, baby. I mean, you know, we know about those girls who wear plaid, so.
Alright, so yes, we're reviewing Halloween, the film that started it all in terms of the slasher genre. We're going to start this off really simply. Susie, tell us what you thought of this film.
This was one of those movies, because it falls under the horror genre, I thought I was going to automatically hate it, because to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the horror genre. Most that I've seen have scared the crap out of me. So I didn't know what to expect when I was going into Halloween, but I was pleasantly surprised by how great this movie actually was. Everything about it I thought was genius. I absolutely loved it. The story, the backstory about Michael Myers, how he became the evil psychopath that he was, the side characters, the music. Oh god, the music was just epic. There's no other word for it. And just the way that they shot the death scenes in this was so clever, because I thought basically horror movie equals gory scenes all the way through. I thought that was how it was going to be, but no, it was very cleverly shot. The cinematography was really excellent. I just thought it was very well done, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I said I didn't expect to go into this film coming out the other end thinking this was a brilliant film, but I did. And it goes into my list of the few horror movies that I do actually love. This one is pretty much up at the top with Carrie. The only things I would say that bugged me slightly, and this just may be me being bitchy about this actress, I don't really like Jamie Lee Curtis. I don't like her reaction shots in this movie really, because I just think it's a little over the top. But that, as I said, maybe just me. I like it when they can portray Tara as like a real person can, but I think she just did it slightly over the top. But as I said, that's just my opinion of it. But in general, I thought she was really well cast in that role, and just the way I just love the movie. I just love everything about it. Even from the scenes of Michael chasing after her back to the house, of him just walking so slowly and everything, make it so menacing and creepy and everything. It was just so good. And I just love those kind of movies where they build up the suspense so much and you just end up screaming at the TV. It's so good. So that was my thoughts on Halloween. I am no longer a Halloween virgin, and I absolutely love it. I'm wanting to go through the sequels now.
Alright, thank you very much for that, Susie. Now, LC, you're our proclaimed horror buff. Why don't you give us your analysis of this film?
Oh, if it comes down to my analysis, this is a horror classic. A must-see for any slasher fan. I do have my debates and my arguments about the historical accuracy of this film, though. Everyone claims it to be the first slasher film. it was the first slasher film. It's the start of the genre. Well, I argue with that constantly because Dario Argento's Deep Red came out in 1975, which was heavily more of a slasher influence than Halloween. Plus, even John Carpenter has said that he was mostly inspired by Bob Clark's 1974 Black Christmas. And a funny story in this matter is that Bob Clark and John Carpenter were actually at a party a long time ago. And John Carpenter said how much of a fan he was of Black Christmas, how much he loved this film. And he asked Bob Clark, can you tell me if there's ever going to be a sequel to Black Christmas? And Bob Clark literally has said in interviews that he said to him, well, I have nothing in the works right now, but I had this idea in my head. And that it was going to be, the killer was caught, and it's like, I don't know, so many years later, and the killer escaped from the mental institute. And now he's running amok throughout the entire town, killing people. He was going to do it as another holiday theme and do it on Halloween. Now, to say that John Carpenter ripped this whole film off is completely bullshit. But you could definitely say that it was heavily inspired by that concept. But back to the actual film at hand now that the facts and the history is out. And yet again, people, Dario Argento, Deep Red, watch it. This is just an amazing film. It's independent underground horror at its best. I mean, directed by John Carpenter, co-written by Deborah Hill, starring Donald Pleasant, and introducing Jamie Lee Curtis in, quote me, I might be wrong here, in I believe her very first film role. And this was just an amazing low-budget film. And it just shows what you can do with no budget and show even simplicity at its best. There is literally no scenes of killing in this film. Well, there's scenes of killing, but there's no blood effects. There's no cuts. There's no special effects in almost any scenes, except for at the very end. And coming from a film standpoint, I mean, the introduction to this film, the first scene is it's just amazing to watch. I mean, it's literally done without a single cut. The very first POV shot of the kid looking at the house, as he walks around the house, looks through the window, goes back through, goes into the kitchen, gets the knife, goes up the stairs. There is literally not a single cut in that scene until he gets to the front door and he looks at the parents. This is just brilliant directing. I mean, honestly, I don't think anybody could do a scene that good without a cut. And I know some people are going to say, well, what about the mask effect? That was a cut scene. Like, no, that was actually done all in post. Now, another fun fact about the beginning of this film is the hand you actually see walking around and grabbing the knife and doing the hacking is actually co-writer Deborah Hill's hand. They needed somebody small enough, and she was the only person who was actually small enough to actually pull off a kid's hand. But this is just a great film. It's an unbelievable film. I mean, the suspense, the drama, the moral story, which I am kind of skeptical about that saying this was a morality tale at best. I think there was just a good concept that people ran with. But it is definitely a must-see, and honestly, come on. How can you go wrong with a spray-painted white William Shatner mask and that iconic freaking 2 notes?
Alright. Thank you very much, LC. Now, as for me, I was pretty much in the same boat as Susie when I first saw this film. I hated horror films. I've never understood the concept of fear as being fun. Then I watched it, and my opinion has completely changed. Elsie and Susie have gone over the music numerous times, so I'm not going to waste my time there. But one thing I think people don't really get about this film is just how amazing it even was that it got made. This film was filmed in approximately 3 weeks. John Carpenter wrote and played the music under a pseudonym. They had to do everything on a budget of about $325,000, which even in the 70s was very low budgeting. And through all that, John Carpenter was able to make an excellent horror film not through cheesy special effects, not through showing absurd monsters, much like the films of the 50s, the B-horror films that relied so much on gimmicks and cheesy monster suits to create an illusion of fear. He went with a simplistic story that many people, particularly teenagers of that time, could in some way relate to. Because back in the day, babysitting was a business. Back in the day, when you were a babysitter, you were babysitting when the parents were out. And you were all alone. And what he was able to do, in my mind, particularly with those POV shots, was he created an atmosphere of a very normal-looking town constantly being watched by a very abnormal person. The way the camera moves throughout the film left me, at the very least, and I think it left audiences at the time, wondering what was a POV shot and what was a regular shot. Because the camera motions are so similar when it's on the POV of Michael Myers and when it's just a regular shot that it's very difficult to tell which is which. So you're kind of constantly looking over your own shoulder, wondering, is someone behind me, watching me? A lot of that does come also from what was not a great acting crew, but a storyline that worked because it focused on primarily three characters. It focused on Michael Myers, then played by Nick Castle. It focused on Laurie Strode, who, yes, Elsie, that was her first major film role. And it focused on the Donald Pleasance character of Dr. Sam Loomis. But, like I said earlier, this was Jamie Lee Curtis's first role. It almost seemed to be built from her, being the daughter of Janet Leigh, the woman from Psycho. And all in all, the atmosphere, the story, the simplistic characters, even as simple things as the lighting, which seem so much more natural than you'd see in a lot of other types of films, they all lended themselves well to a very scary film and a very good film-going experience. Alright, so, Susie, you came into this not having seen this movie before, and you loved it. Really, what do you think drew you most to this? What do you think made this such a good film?
It was a couple of things, really. One, music always draws me into a film. The music in this is just so iconic that it just drew me in straight away. I'd heard it previously. It was always a musical score that always stuck out for me, and I was just really intrigued to see the movie itself and how it played about with the story and the characters and everything. And it just worked so perfectly. It was just absolute perfection. Also, the cinematography. I know it's something that I go on and on and on about, but cinematography is really, really important, and especially with the beginning, as Elsie said, just focusing on how Michael Myers became Michael Myers. Just the way that it was shot, just from the boy's point of view, it was just genius. And that just really stuck out for me. I just absolutely was drawn in. And always suspense. I absolutely love suspense in these kind of movies. The reason that I was probably drawn away from seeing Halloween to begin with is because of my perception of what horror movies are today. Full of torture porn and gore and a lot of unnecessary things, in my opinion. But Halloween played it so subtly. It was just genius. And that's really what drew me into it. It just didn't have to play off all this, let's get loads of blood and guts out on the screen, make the audience sick and everything. Because that puts me off. I like things to be subtle and well executed and things like that. So it was really, really, really well done.
Yeah, but what you're forgetting is this came out in 1978. The facts of why you're saying this is good is because it predated, well, technically didn't really predate, but it was a slasher film that was made before Tom Savini's special effects were pretty much the standard practice in films. But the thing you keep saying, though, is the music. And yes, if it wasn't for the music in this film, the film would have sucked. And here's another one of my fun facts for the night, and that's when John Carpenter first finished editing this film, he gave it to the studio before he finished the music. And he gave a test screening to the guys who produced it, and they looked at it and they went, "This is the worst fucking film ever. It makes no sense. It sucks. It's not suspenseful. It's not scary. It's like, you just stole our money. We can't do nothing with this." Then about 3 months later, he finally finished the scores, and he put the music in, and now it's the horror legend that it is, which is the proven case that music brings you into the story and sets the mood.
Oh, it does.
And honestly, if it wasn't for that iconic little number, nobody would even remember this film. If it wasn't for that music, the Cinema Snob would be reviewing this thing right now.
I think you're putting way too much on just the opening set of music. Yes, that is the iconic piece of music, but don't underestimate the rest of the score through the film. There are other parts
I'm not denying any part of the music, but the music sets the mood. It sets the tone. The whole score of the film, it just makes the film. You want to have a fun night, and you want to just have some friends over and have a fun night, put Halloween on and put it on mute and watch it. It's horrible. I mean, if somebody's never seen Halloween before and they watched it on mute in the background, like on mute in the background of a party, they're gonna think it's a stupid, cheesy, freaking like '70s, late '70s, '80s horror film. Then you sit them down in a dark room with that music playing, and the experience changes. But to bring up another thing is, you guys keep saying about the POV shots and how genius that was. That came from the inspiration from Black Christmas. Anyone who's seen Black Christmas knows that the killer was never seen in that entire film, and it was all shot through the eyes of the killer. And that's where I got on the fact that John Carpenter was heavily inspired by that film.
Potentially, but being groundbreaking. I never said that Halloween was groundbreaking in the use of the POV shots, but they did it so well, mixing the POV and non-POV shots to where you had to question whether or not you were actually looking at a POV shot while you were following Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis's character. Because of how well they executed that, I have to give it to this team. Yes, Black Christmas may have done it first, and perhaps John Carpenter was inspired by that, but he did it very, very well here.
I'm not saying he didn't. I just want those facts to be out there. Honestly, I love this film. I absolutely love this film. I've watched it thousands of times, and I was literally excited when I heard we were doing this for the first episode, because this is the film that you see. You turn on a TV on Halloween, or the week going up to Halloween, and this is all you see. Well, actually, nowadays, all you see are the frickin' sequels, because those are frickin' cheaper. But this is the staple of what a horror film should be. I mean, it has drama, it has suspense, it has terrifying images, and it has no blood. I think there's like 2 scenes of blood. I think one might be like 2 drips coming out of Michael Myers' head when he pulls out. I think the one is when he pulls out the coat hanger. And honestly, I don't think there is any other scene that had blood.
No, I don't think there is.
But to bring up another fact, though, is the fact that they actually had a pretty big star in this film with Donald Pleasence. And half the reason this film had the distribution that it did is because it had Donald Pleasence, which came from like The Great Escape and all these great classic films. And it stapled Dr. Loomis as a main character. And for another fun fact is, John Carpenter could only afford Donald Pleasence for 2 days. Maybe 3, don't quote me, but I think it was definitely 2 or 3 days. So all his scenes were shot literally within 2 to 3 days.
One thing that this film does geniusly well, I just think is incredible, is the idea of fear. Like, at the end, and when he's shot out the balcony by Dr. Loomis, and then you get the shot of him on the ground, and then you get the shot back of Laurie and the doctor, and then you go back and he's disappeared. That scared the crap out of me. It's just that element of fear, I just think was played so well in this. It was so good.
Oh, it was a genius ending. I mean, the fact that the killer disappeared at the end. And honestly, everybody and their mother has said this, but I'm going to repeat it. The reason John Carpenter did that was so that the killer was still out there. So when you left the theater, you left the drive-in, you were going home, riding your bike, and you were walking up the stairwell to your house and you're putting the keys in the door, you would look over your shoulder and go, is he there? Because there was no closure at the end.
It's just left it open, and that's
a
scary
open.
thing.
Yeah, I mean, this maniac that has no rhyme or no reason is out there, and you don't know where he is. And you can't tell me, like, coming home from a theater in 1978 after seeing this, you wouldn't have walked up to your doorway, and before you pulled your keys out and put it in the door, you would have looked over your shoulder real quick and gone, is he there? Is anybody there? I mean, it's just a genius ending, and I mean, it's just... I honestly don't believe John Carpenter did that to make a sequel, because in the 70s, sequels were not big money. You didn't make sequels to films back then. You did, but it was very rare in between, especially for an indie film. But personally, the real question at large here is, how the fuck did a William Shatner sue somebody? I mean, they literally went to a Halloween store, and no pun intended, that's literally what they did. They went to a Halloween store, grabbed the William Shatner mask off the frickin' shelf, and spray painted it white. How the fuck did it fucking William Shatner sue somebody? And why the fuck I just sounded like JJ, I have no idea.
I don't know. You're channeling Attack of the Awesome now.
Oh, yeah, great.
No, I'm better. I'm better than that fucking hack of a fucking show. Okay.
Yeah. Let's.
Your mediocrity. Don't fucking go listen to that. They want to listen to fucking entertaining. They'll listen to this or fucking some other podcast. Hell,
with LC
fucking microphone and fucking be more entertaining than that crap.
I get where you're coming from on that, LC, but I don't know. The thing about it is, for me at least, the story is not that great. It's very good to create a scary experience, but that doesn't necessarily make it good. Well, not as good as other films have been, I guess. I guess the way I've started to look at it is, to make a good horror film, you need to have an extremely simplistic story. To make a good thrilling film, you need to have a bit more complicated story. And the thing with this is, it could have all been settled if anyone, had just simply said, something's not right here, I should call the cops. Hello, police? Da-da-da-da-da.
If you pay attention, Loomis was with the police. They were looking for him.
Remember,
this is a small town. They don't have a SWAT team and a swarm of police officers. There's like 2 to 5 guys with fucking shotguns and a couple of handguns.
But I'm pretty sure there's someone always at the office on dispatch in case there's an actual call, as opposed to having the entire force out looking for the potential killer when they barely believed Dr. Loomis at the beginning of the film.
Well, it's Halloween night. I mean, frickin' that's the busiest crime night of the year. I mean, police are running fucking rampant as it is at that time. I mean, they probably, if somebody called and said, hey, there's a guy trying to kill me, most of the police are gonna fucking write it off as a prank.
I guess my point is, the entire plot is so simplistic that sometimes it seems too simplistic. That's what keeps it from, at least in my mind, breaking that barrier from an all-time great film within its genre to being an all-time great film overall. But that's just me, and just my opinion. And I mean, I look at everything else with this film, and it's impossible to get away from all the positives you guys have mentioned. You've covered pretty much everything I had to say, and, you know, when it comes right down to it, this is a film that if you enjoy film, you should see. If you're a horror film buff and you haven't seen this, then you're not a horror film buff. Turn in your card right now, and it's just an altogether very well put together film. Alright, so tell me, if you had to pick one scene, one sequence from this film that you think was the most iconic, what would it be and why? Susie, why don't you start us off?
For me, the one that stands out the most is the scene where Laurie's running back to the house and Michael Myers is just walking really, really, really slowly, because that was just so full of suspense, and it just, oh god, it was so good. I know that's one of the scenes that was from the trailer, so I'd probably seen that a million times before anyway, but that's just so iconic, and it's just, he doesn't have to run, he just can walk slowly. up to is just so full of suspense and fear and everything. It's so good.
And how about you, Elsie?
Well, I could go the cliche route and say the closet scene when Michael's breaking through the wall of the closet and he's swaying at freaking Laurie Strode's. But honestly, I think the most iconic scene in this film would probably most definitely have to be when Dr. Loomis and the sheriff are driving and Loomis does that incredible speech. And if you guys just hold on from our insightful conversation for a second, we're going to play a clip from that.
I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left. No reason, no conscience, no understanding, and even the most rudimentary sense of life or death, of good or evil, right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
And after that insightful frickin' segment, I actually had to apologize. I actually had the version confused. And yes, Dr. Loomis was talking to the sheriff in the house and not actually in the police car. But still does not take away the impact of that scene.
Those are both very good picks. But for me, I think it all comes down, and this part I think really is the cliche. It's not the closet scene that you brought up, Elsie. It's the scene immediately after the closet scene. After you've seen Michael go down. He's been jabbed in the eye with a coat hanger. And in spite of all of this, he just so quietly, as Laurie Strode is recovering, will sit up, looks over, and continues his rampage. For me, that's what made Michael Myers iconic and what made the modern slasher film. Other movies may have come up with the concepts or the cinematography, but that one scene cemented the fact that slashers don't die. Doesn't matter what you do, slasher ain't gonna die. That's what inspired Freddy, Jason, Chucky, all those slasher icons that have never died, was that one scene.
And, Mikkel, I can honestly not agree more with that statement. I mean, this was truly, as much as I do like to say that it shouldn't be considered the first slasher film, it is truly a great film, and it is the staple. It's the bar that every person who ever wants to make a slasher film should try to achieve. This is just independent cinema at its best, and honestly, something like this happens once every 30 years. So I honestly pray, and I do mean pray, some new directors get out there and actually try to make something this great. Because we need something like this again. Stop with the remakes, stop with the revamps and the prequels, and just start writing good old-fashioned slasher horror again.
Alright, now, as we come to the end of our little jaunt through the glen of horror in Halloween, let's give this movie its final ratings. Now, what we're going to do is each give the movie a rating on a scale of 1 to 10, and give you the average of our scores. If you agree, disagree, feel free to leave a comment.
And if you want to bitch about what we said, feel free to leave the comment. We will still call you out, remember?
Indeed. Alright, Susie, what's your final rating on Halloween?
I would have to say 8 out of 10.
Elsie?
I'm going a complete 10 for 10. This is definitely the bar that every slasher film should try to raise. This is definitely the kind of film that every person trying to make a slasher film should try to raise the level to. I mean, this is just perfection at its best. I mean, it's dramatic, it's the cinematography, the story, the music. It's a perfect overall horror film, and that is why it's the legend it is today.
Alright, and now my score, or the correct score, A proper 9 out of 10. It's a great film for horror fans. If you're a horror fan, you have to go see this film. It's an excellent overall film. It's not quite transcendent in my mind to the level of some of my favorite films, and that's mostly having to do with what I think is a little bit overly simplistic story, but again, that's not something that's unworkable. It's just a minor gripe I have, a very minor gripe with the quality of this film. So, averaging it out, Susie gave it an 8, Elsie a 10, me a 9. 27 divided by 3 is 9. The Movie 360 crew gives this a 9 out of 10. You know, Halloween's coming up soon. If you have an opportunity to go pick this up, particularly at your local Walmart, that's where I found one, go grab it. It's worth the money.
Lose your Halloween virginity now.
But before we leave here tonight, I gotta say one thing, and that's, we would like to thank our new sponsor, our new host site, Reviewtopia, for fucking picking us up.
Hold on a second, it's Reviewers Unknown?
Wait, those fucking guys with the fucking masks, logo, and everything?
Yep.
Why the fuck did we agree to be on that hack of a site?
Because no one else will have you, LC. You have too many outstanding restraining orders.
Well, actually, it makes sense, because I actually slept with two members of that. Yeah, actually, that does make sense why we got picked up.
Alright, we've wrapped up with Halloween, and now we must move on to the next film. So how about this? We know what the next film is. You clearly don't. But I'm going to give you a chance to figure it out. There are 5 connections that I'm going to highlight from this film. Go ahead and see if you can find out from those connections what the next film will be. The 5 connections are, of course, director John Carpenter, stars Donald Pleasance and Jamie Lee Curtis, supporting character Charles Cyphers, and other supporting character Nick Castle. Now tell us, what film would we be doing next? Tell us what the connection is, and you'll find out when we come back next week.